All right, students, so this is a lecture about portraiture, specifically about composition. So I'm just going to give a little overview of portraiture in like Western art oil painting, and just to give you some ideas so that you're thinking about when you are composing your portrait, instead of just sitting down and starting to paint it, to really think about that composition and what you would like to include in your composition. So we will be in a studio painting from a model, right? And you're going to do a couple compositional sketches to try to think out what you would like to include, how much of the model you're going to get in there, etc. So early portraiture, and when I say portraiture, I mean painting people that are supposed to look like a specific person, not for religious imagery or things like that. So painting people did exist before, right? But a lot of it was maybe, you know, religious figures meant for a different context. This is early Renaissance wedding or betrothal type portraiture was usually done in profile like this, right? Especially for women, well, only for women, women of a certain class. Making eye contact with someone was thought of as crass or too forward or even obscene in some cases. So women, as they were betrothed to someone, would be painted from the side so you can kind of see what she looks like, but she is averting her eyes in this way. Right? Men were painted somewhat like this. You can see they have a little bit more life in them. This is a sort of either straightforwards or three-quarters type view. Note how much of the body is included in these. So you have the head, shoulders, down to the elbows and hands in some cases. Notice in one of these there's some sort of landscape painted in the background. The one on the right, you have some sort of, window or something back there implied. Right, and then you have Leonardo da Vinci with the Mona Lisa, this one on the right, very famous. She's got her body sort of turned. She's making eye contact with us. I did read an essay that talked about Da Vinci as sort of a feminist in this sense, in terms of painting this woman as someone with a personality and making eye contact with us, and has a little facial expression. Another one on the left. This one is my favorite Da Vinci painting. She is still averting her eyes, but symbolic, sort of animals are pretty common in portraits painted of women. Notice the one on the right with that landscape and the one on the left with a black background, right? Also notice how Da Vinci is pulling the shoulder out with the light and pushing that one back, sinking into the shadows. All right, so as we kind of move on through the Renaissance, this one, very interesting, full of wealth and status symbols and all that sort of thing. Again, looking at the composition, we have upper body, head, shoulders, hands. Right, now we have Raphael, definitely very much inspired by the Mona Lisa. Many portraits were for many, many years. We have women basically indoors. Women of a certain class were indoors, but they have, their windows you can see behind them. This one on the right, this one on the right I really like, this, she's holding a baby unicorn. Look at how its little hand tucks under her thumb. So something like this, the Renaissance sky, dark blue fading to light, a little bit of a landscape, very common. If you're painting somebody and you want to put something other than a dark studio background, you can't go wrong with the sky. All right, Rembrandt, he has a lot of self-portraits, and this one you can see the composition. There's a little ledge there put there for interest. Again, we have head, shoulders, elbow, hand, and a little bit of this kind of lifelike posture. Right, so you can imagine if Rembrandt was painting on a smaller canvas and we just had it cropped here and just zoomed in on the head and shoulders, that would give a different feeling than this one where you could see him just confidently resting his elbow right on that ledge. All right, now we're moving into the pre-Raphaelites. Pre-Raphaelites were romantic artists, and this artist is a woman, Kate Bunce, so these are some of her portrait paintings. Pre-Raphaelites were obsessed with just painting details, loads and loads and loads of details everywhere. These have now I'm not sure how our model is going to be posing for us, but just taking a look at some of these, for ideas for, if you wanted to put some sort of a narrative spin on these, look at how this background is painted in each of these. All right, John Everett Millais, another pre-Raphaelite artist. This has some sort of, pre-Raphaelites were obsessed with literature, mythology, so, Shakespeare, and then Greco-Roman mythology type romantic figures. All right, and now moving into, quote-unquote modern art, here's one by Paul Gauguin. Now, you are not required to paint a portrait in any specific style or method or anything like that. So these would be something like this, more of an indirect type painting where you have a monochrome underpainting and some colored glazing on top. Whereas something like this, obviously direct painting, not, so Gauguin was more of a color person, and you can see he's using outlines, is painting the form somewhat flatly, but also, it is a very beautiful portrait in my opinion. There's a lot of color going on, and also, the background, I'm assuming with Gauguin, some of it is kind of made up. Some of the color is definitely made up. He liked to use symbolism as well in a lot of his pieces. Here's another portrait Gauguin painted of a woman in Tahiti. And again, look at the composition. So there's, going back to Renaissance pieces like this is very planned out, very intentional, right? Made to be, we have, look at the space above the head, next to the head. It's a little bit off center, but there's a little bit of an angle. So there's a certain formula, tradition of composition that certain artists would follow. And then you have Gauguin. So she's leaning to the left. There's definitely some intentional space in composition going on here. This one is off to the right. You have her eyes kind of going off to the side here. Look at the kind of the interior space that's happening back there, right? Here we have a Degas painting. Now we're getting, so Degas, Paul Gauguin, we're in the 19th century and artists are getting more modern with their composition. So you can, if you think of the Raphael paintings we were looking at just a minute ago, the composition is the composition, the lighting, all of that kind of thing is much more formal, whereas this person almost has a sort of, I want to say, a photography sort of aesthetic, and photography was coming into being at this time. So you have, I feel like something like this is a lot more lively. I can see a lot more of this person's like personality and posture and stuff like that, versus something like the Raphael paintings, which are much more statuesque. Right? Pierre Puvis de Chavannes, he is a turn of the century, or the fin de siècle. I'm not good at pronouncing French or whatever. But anyhow, he's more of a symbolist painter, so it's kind of springing out of the Romanticism movement, but now more into symbolism. So you could see something like this with a painted landscape. You have the little, I'm not sure if she's supposed to be sort of allegorical figure, right? More Degas here. So Degas on the right, we have a pastel drawing. On the left, a painting. I'm pretty sure that's a painting. But you can see he's got a cigarette, a little hat, and a little walking stick or whatever. Notice the close cropping in of this one on the right versus this one on the left. So when you're sitting down to compose your portrait, you want to kind of think of how close you're going to come in. If you want some of the upper body to make a portrait like the one on the left, or if you just want to zoom in more on the face. One thing that I recommend to everybody is, think of the size canvas you have, and do not do the face any smaller. I sometimes tell my students no smaller than your entire hand, from the base of, from your wrist all the way to the tip of your fingers. But even that is pushing it. That's a little small. The smaller you go, the more difficult it's going to be. All right, so take your canvas size. If you have a small canvas, definitely don't do something like the one on the left. And here are some beautiful Van Gogh portraits. As we can tell, Van Gogh has his very distinctive brushstroke style, and these are very modern in the sense that they're less formal, right? Especially the one on the left. And in fact, Van Gogh was trying to create a certain mood with these, because we have a lot of Van Gogh's letters that he wrote describing his different paintings and what he was trying to go for. And I'm just gonna, you can pause this for a moment. I'm not gonna read this out loud to you, but this is what Vincent van Gogh wrote about this portrait of Mr. Gachet, and the way that the composition works in showing these expression that Van Gogh wanted to show with this piece. Right, so thinking of, I want you especially to look at this one on the right and think of, when you're doing your portrait, what sort of background are you going to come up with? You can do something like this. You can think of, doing a sort of Rembrandt type background. Look at the background here, it's simple. There's a little bit of lightness. Look at this upper left, lower right kind of light coming through. Look at how it agrees with the light striking the upper left of the hand throwing a little shadow on this ledge, and look how the ledge gets light over here, right? So background, sometimes I have an idea for the background while I'm doing the painting, and sometimes I come up with the idea for the background when I'm done. The background in this piece, which unfortunately I forgot to type the artist's name in, and now I don't remember who made this painting, but check out the background there as another option. We are going to be inside painting this portrait, and doing a background like this does give the portrait a certain mood. And look at these two by Da Vinci, right? Either, they're pretty similar in terms of composition and everything, and just look at how the mood changes between the one on the left, the lady with the ermine, versus the Mona Lisa. All right, now we're moving in. Okay, so we have, these are out of order a little bit. We have Degas portrait. I believe this is going to be chalk, like pastel. And we have artists in the 19th century being influenced by Japanese art and the flatness of Japanese art, and painting things like wallpaper and stuff like that in the background. So this is a beautiful piece. We have some pattern back there. Again, Van Gogh, if we look at this one on the right, that flatness of that background is definitely influenced by Japanese art as well. Van Gogh is known to have done multiple copies or paintings of Japanese art that was coming into France during this time period. So there's this flatness, patterns, floral kind of decorative motifs, things like that are influenced by Japanese art. Right, and Picasso, we have his brushy style, and we have a little bit of a suggested interior space there, right? So again, when our model sits there and you're planning out your portrait, having something like this where you have head, shoulders, upper body, like this one on the left, and the one on the right. Either of these could be things you think about for how much of the body you want to include. All right, Picasso's famous portrait of Gertrude Stein. This one is pulled back even more. Again, we have the suggestion of the interior space. I feel like that does make it seem more of a modern painting versus one of those, those very dark backgrounds in some of the Renaissance pieces and some of the Rembrandt pieces. All right, moving on with Picasso. Picasso lived to be quite old, so he went through many phases of portraiture. Here we have some, again, the elbow and hand. The hands are very expressive, so if you feel up to it, if you're maybe an experienced portrait painter and you feel like you're going to have time to tackle that hand, that is something you can think about. A lady with a crow, a pet crow, and a person with a beverage. All right, more Picasso portraits. These are, the one on the right I believe is a self-portrait from his younger years. Lady on the left is named Olga something or other. The one on the left, he painted some pretty detailed details on the clothing, on the chair or whatever she's sitting on, and then just the background is unfinished. Right, so there is something about leaving a background unfinished like this that draws attention to the fact that it is a painting, right? You can see the paintingness of the painting, something about that's interesting. I'm actually unsure about this, if that was done intentionally or he just literally didn't finish it. All right, more Picasso. I put that one in on twice on accident. This one on the left I really like. This is from Picasso's Rose period. So this one is called Boy with a Pipe, or in French or Spanish or whatever museum has this, Garçon à la pipe or whatever it's called. I I apologize for my bad accent. Anyhow, we have a somewhat, naturalistic painting of this boy. And then we have these flower designs painted in the background. I actually don't know if he was wearing a flower garland on his head like that when he sat for this portrait. But painting in some abstract designs like this is definitely an option if you're thinking of wanting to, if you're trying to figure out what to do with your background or how your painting is going to work out. Something like this is a nice, at least I think it works very well in this Picasso piece. Also looking at the woman with the crow portrait, again, look at that beautiful, just violet purple type background that he puts in there. So that's interesting, another thing to think about as well. I feel like bright color, so that deep red on the boy with the pipe, that earth red color is a nice warm color that I feel like is a safer bet than something crazy like bright purple. You run the risk of having it clash. And somehow in Picasso's piece, it isn't feeling clashy to me. But that is I feel like for me, I would feel like that's a risk choosing a color like that. But, you're gonna get better by taking risks. So now we're moving even more into the future. Rene Magritte is a surrealist painter. So the surrealists worked with the subconscious mind. They were very influenced by Sigmund Freud and his theory of the subconscious. So surrealists liked to use naturalistic painting techniques to paint things that are unnatural. So if it was just not realistic or not naturalistic, it would not have the same effect. Although many surrealists did go off and paint more expressive, abstracted type of work. But anyhow, looking at the composition of both of these, especially the one on the left, you have a very straightforward formal portrait, but then, some kind of weirdness happening in the background. We have that Rembrandt sky. Remember, we talked about that earlier. Like I said, you cannot go wrong with putting that. I mean, I shouldn't say you cannot go wrong, but it is a very safe bet to do that Renaissance type sky. So you have this sort of almost Raphael type look to these paintings, but with much more modern stuff going on. You have a modern dress, modern clothing, and this one on the right, just a lot of weirdness happening. So that's an option to you as well. If you're just such a fast portrait painter, right, that you end up having all this extra time and want to paint a giant bird as well. Another Magritte painting, this portrait, I don't know the exact history with this woman, but this was a friend of his. So we have all kinds of, surreal stuff happening around in the background. But this one, notice the composition, is very non-Renaissance in terms of that we just have the head, shoulders. We don't have the upper body like the torso or the elbows. So that makes it less formal, right? The surrealist stuff, we have the sky in the background, a curtain, an anti-candle. The candle is the opposite of glowing. It's darkening the whole side of her face. So this, I'm not showing, you do not have to go and do something weird like this, but if creativity strikes you, you are allowed to. All right, and now we have Alex Katz, who is, we're moving into contemporary art now. I don't have his Wikipedia page open in front of me, so I could be off, but I think this type of work of his is largely from the 1980s, right? So you have a very flat color, right? There is some shading, in and around here. He's going for a completely different aesthetic. You have details like this in the background. She looks like she's sitting back on a couch and just really slouching over and leaning away from us. But the way the composition is cropped, you can't see. Like, remember the Rembrandt one that we looked at earlier? Here, so you can see down, you can see his body posture. You have this very just kind of classic composition. And this one is sort of reminiscent of that, except it's cropped in so closely that it has a much more personal feel. I feel like I'm in her personal space. All right, moving on forwards, this artist, I'm just including this. This is Lu Kong, an artist that I really like who does a lot of portraits. These are oil painting portraits. And I'm showing you these to think about the the composition and the cropping and the light the colors in the background, how they share the color of the color palette that this artist uses in the skin tone, and just the really interesting effects that has. All right, so here's some more work by Lu Kong. These are pretty large oil paintings, all right? Another one with the sky. You don't have to paint the sky, but I'm just saying. It's a very common thing. All right, so these, thinking about the color palette in the background and sharing that with the color palette of the flesh. All right, moving. Yeah, so Lu Kong is a contemporary artist. John Curran, also a contemporary artist. He's known for having paintings that aren't really that serious. But this one I just wanted to share because I thought that was a very interesting kind of composition. We have the sky back there, the kind of grass up front. It makes for a very different feeling for something that's composed, like one of these, right? So, if you have a bigger canvas and you wanted to do something like this, or even, even cropping it in, imagining a background, something like this for your portrait. All right, another John Curran piece. This is so the other two I showed you were older John Curran pieces. This is a newer piece of his. This one was actually a portrait of the actress Jennifer Lawrence, and was on the cover of Vogue magazine. So here we have, just look at this nice blank wall in the background. It's reminiscent of an interior space. So we have a little bit of shadow over here. So we can see the light is coming this way. Look at her neck. Light mass, shadow mass, and then just this little suggestion over here of a shadow being cast on the wall behind there, right? It just lets us know she's in an interior space. If that shadow was not there, she could maybe possibly be outside or something, right? A cloudy day outside. And the last one I'm going to show is a painting by Kehinde Wiley. He's another contemporary artist. He likes to paint pretty photorealistic portraits and then have, I don't want to say wallpapery type backgrounds, but he does make these backgrounds up. And thinking about that Van Gogh painting we talked about earlier, is really interesting. What Kehinde Wiley is doing was sort of the same concept, but really just ramping up the detail on that patterned background,